Hello, everyone. It's kind of lonely here, just being the only one at Retro Room Records, but thank you for joining our September Klamath Film member meeting. We have last month's featured guest as well as this month's featured guest already on the call. So that's wonderful. Thank you for everyone here. I have to keep one door open or 1 ear open in case anyone knocks on the door. It's locked right now. So we do these meetings once a month. I think everyone here is new, except of course, everyone here is a regular except Dennis. Welcome. So normally we don't have our guests join until a little ways in because we usually go through some announcements. But our main announcements, I think everyone knows, is the film festival is 2 weeks away. So let me just run through a couple things with that. Actually, first, should probably just go through introductions. We all know each other on our end, but gives us a chance to get to know you and reacquaint with Catherine. So again, my name is Kurt Lidke. I'm the board chair for Klamath Film, former executive director. I'm a filmmaker and videographer for Klamath Community College. Also a commercial drone pilot and a private pilot as well. Lori, Joyce, and Nina, hello and welcome back. Whoever wants to introduce themselves to our guests, please do so.
I'm a local independent photographer here in Klamath Falls. Sorry I couldn't make it in person, Kurt.
It's okay. The door's locked anyway.
Well, that's a good reason. I'm glad I didn't waste the trip.
It's fine.
But Howard and I are both here online, and it's nice to see Catherine again. I am, like I said, an independent photographer, also working at Klamath Art Association, now one of the volunteers. We're having excellent shows every month, and I encourage everyone to come by, even if you've just got a few minutes. We're a small, independent, locally owned gallery with some extremely well-talented artists, a little bit of something for everybody. And that's
Howard?
Hey, being handled.
Hey, Howard, can't really hear you.
30 or 40 years in Hollywood, public television, if you'll excuse the expression, not film. 30 or 40 documentaries, long form docs on the PBS network as a photographer, broadcast engineer in San Jose, San Francisco, and then Los Angeles. Retired a long time ago and moved to Klamath Falls a little over 3 years ago, loving it. Well, that's pretty much my brief bio. Dare I say it again, television, not film, sorry, but that's where I started. I couldn't handle those big cameras with the whirly heads, but the little TV stuff worked really good for me.
Well, thank you, Joyce, and thank you, Howard, for always being here. Appreciate you being a part of this. And also Lori and Nina's back as well. Hi, Lori. You want to introduce yourself to our guest? We know you very well.
Yeah, no worries. I'm Lori. I have been a Klamath Film member for about 5 years now. I've been on the board for a couple years, and I volunteer with Klamath Film, as well as have done some backstage work at the Ross Raglan, which is the local theater here. Spotlighting was pretty fun to do. And I've made a couple of short films that I've gotten to KIF, The Puzzle in 2020 and Squirrely Puzzling this year. So bringing entertainment around puzzles, I guess, to a different light. But I just enjoy creative endeavors, and I'm a published poet within Klamath County, and I also write short stories but just like to do creative stuff. And I will also be going to the national jigsaw competition next month. So
Very
should be
cool. Oh, did we lose you, Lori?
Oh, I'm still here. That
Oh,
was
okay.
it. I think that's good.
And Nina, hello again. Welcome back.
It's good to be back. So I'm a filmmaker in Lafayette, Oregon. Mostly do production design, but I've been doing a lot more short films of my own and cinematography just to keep going because there's not a lot of work out here. So I just kind of do my own thing. Getting ready to work on a full-length feature here shortly. I'm writing the script right now. I just kind of just whatever I can do to get any kind of film experience and volunteer. I volunteer a couple charity events and film all the stuff that happens at the event. So still just kind of keep going and doing whatever creative I can.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us again. Appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing you down here in a couple of weeks for the film festival.
Yes, I'm excited to meet everybody and be able to help you guys out.
And Catherine stepped away because Otis Days.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm gonna call her later. This is really important to me.
Yep.
Anyway, let me get my screen on.
Hi again.
Joyce, Nina, Kurt, Howard. Is it Howard or Harold?
Howard.
Howard. I don't remember things I hear, but when I see the name, it's great. And I am just so excited about Dennis being here. I have nothing but incredible respect for this man. It just blows my mind. I don't know what film number he's on now, but like 182nd film this year. But we had two things in common. One was Animal House. He was one of my best extras. After we interviewed 5,000 people, nobody wanted, it was hurry up and wait, and everybody was bored and nobody wanted to work. And one night I ended up having to go hunt them down, him and his best friend, Bruce Lundy, because I had to have them in the shop the next day. And I think their dorm roommate said that he thought they went to the McDonald Theater. And I actually drove from Lorraine Highway to town, went in the theater and found them. And I need you to work tomorrow. And the other thing was Cinema 7, which was the art house that I told you about last week. And what an incredible bonding experience with both him and Dennis to know that they were there and that it actually happened. That was actually a place to watch incredible film for 14 years. So that's enough for me. I do want to give you a report, Kurt, about the latest on the festivities in 2 weeks. So maybe after the meeting, you and I can chat for a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
Got our plane tickets for Dick and Otis yesterday, and I need to talk to you about some other things. So may I please introduce one of my favorite people on the planet, Dennis Cozzalio.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Catherine. You're much too kind, as usual.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. Dennis, sit tight for just a second, then we'll get to your whole background and what you do in the film industry and anything else. We're very Animal House centric right now in anticipation of the film festival, so we'll talk about that. So first off, thank you everyone again for being here. We did have to update our schedules slightly. We had one film drop out. And so we added a lunch break on Saturday. That may be kind of small for you to see it. It's okay. It's up. It's been updated on the website. So the new breakdown, of course, Friday is still unchanged. Our Epic Toga party is going to go forward on Friday with Catherine's documentary and Animal House and a cast reunion and Otis Day and food trucks and beer garden, and should just be a blast. Saturday, we had one film drop out. We're not going to be doing the world premiere of Duplicity, so we added in a lunch break. But everything else is same schedule approximately, and Sunday is unchanged as well. So just FYI, we're down one film, but we still got plenty of great stuff to show. And we are, of course, the only film festival around that exclusively shows made in Oregon films. So our big thing is, of course, Animal House Friday night. Our festival, traditionally, we only show one film on our opening night, and we celebrate that film. Last year was Meek's Cutoff. The year before that, we did The Last Blockbuster. Before that, Phoenix, Oregon. Before that, Lean on Pete. So we always pick one film that is specific to Oregon that we want to celebrate for our opening night. And this year we thought it's our 10th anniversary, and what better than the ultimate comedy film and the ultimate Oregon film, National Lampoon's Animal House. We've been so blessed to have Catherine join our team in planning and preparing for this to make this a really fun special event. It's the 44th anniversary of the making of Animal House. So I don't know if there's going to be very many more anniversaries after this one. So let's make it special. I'm hoping everyone comes in a toga. We will have a Rocky Horror Picture Show style on stage dance off during the fraternity party scene. So that is the plan. Then, of course, Catherine over there, as a reminder, Catherine will be there. Here is her book, Echoes from the Set. That's also up there, and a photo of her with Belushi. So Catherine is bringing down some of her books. So we're planning to do a little bit of a signing on opening night, as well as her documentary, and at least 10 cast members from the film are going to be joining us as well. So should be tons of fun Friday night. Tickets are currently available. That opening night is just $15. And then depending on if you want to go for one day or multiple days, our prices go up for the festival. If you can't attend in person, we also have an online pass. We will be live streaming everything that we do on stage, and everything will be available on demand through the end of September. Beyond that, yesterday, we appointed 2 new board members. So Chuck Edson and Stephen Cardell are now the newest members of the Klamath Film Board of Directors. And we also formally appointed Cassidy Quistorf as our new executive director. So Cassidy's not here. She's probably working on the festival right now. But she is officially the new executive director going forward. So we'll have more about that during the festival itself. With that, before we delve into getting to know our guest and talking about film, does anyone have any projects that they've been working on, or any upcoming things that they'd like to announce? I know, Lori, that's super cool. You're getting to go to the National Jigsaw thing.
Yeah, it's the first time that they're doing it, and it's being sponsored by Ravensburger, which is a pretty large it's a German-owned puzzle company. But yeah, so we'll see. There might be future ones. The World Championship is in Spain, which is a little bit farther to travel than just Slovenia.
Yeah. Oh, and before I forget, also, I need to show off. You may be seeing these all over town, but there are our official KIF posters. We also have yard signs up. We've ordered shirts, hats, have all sorts of stuff. If we can't sell tickets to people going to a toga party and Animal House celebration, I don't know what we're even doing. So hopefully we see everyone out on the 16th, 17th, and 18th. But that's super cool, Lori. Outside of we'll have Squirrely Puzzling on Sunday at 11:30 is when you're slotted to show your film.
Yeah, and I guess for the featured guests, Squirrely Puzzling is what I would consider a funny and heartwarming tale of squirrels and a jigsaw puzzle. So it's a 5-minute short, and it's a lot of fun, I think.
Lori made it stop motion, which I appreciate stop motion. I don't have the patience for stop motion. Yeah, but I'm not sure if as a critic, Dennis, sometimes you give stop motion films a bit of slack, just knowing the background of how long it took to make.
I do. And I love the form as well. So it's like, I grew up watching Ray Harryhausen and all the movies of that ilk. And so I do appreciate it. And there's actually a new movie out this year by one of the effects artists who worked on Star Wars and Starship Troopers. His name is Phil Tippett, and he worked on this movie that just came out in theaters this year called Mad God. He worked on it for 30 years. And to your point, Kurt, it put him in a mental institution.
Yeah.
3 weeks. Seriously. And you look at the movie and you go, okay, I get it. I understand, because it's one of these things where he just kept going and going and going, and he didn't know where to stop it.
Right.
It's one of those things where a lot of people, including myself, kind of look at it as sort of a pinnacle of the form in a lot of ways.
Stop motion is, I mean, yeah, it has a grand history. You mentioned Harryhausen and of course, the what is now Leica before in the 80s when they were doing all the California Raisins stuff, and then going back to the 60s with all of the Christmas shorts that get shown
Right.
again and again. There is certainly a grand history to it, but just the toll it takes, the time that it takes to produce that. I always give a special nod of appreciation and recognition for anyone who wants to attempt stop motion, because I can't. I just cannot.
Have you tried it?
I've tried a little bit. So I teach an annual film camp with students, and I've shown them the basis of it, of like, okay, let's take 24 photos and move just ever so slightly to show you what 1 second of film looks like of stop motion, and now repeat that for an hour and a half to make the next Leica film.
Yeah.
And even doing like that 1 second is just a grind. So
Oh yeah. My friends and I in high school, that's what we did. That's our hobby, was shooting Super 8 stop motion stuff. And those reels are only 4 minutes long, but it takes a while to fill up an 8mm film reel, 4 minutes with stop motion stuff. But we had fun, and some of it actually turned out okay.
It's rewarding too. You get to see what you brought to life and what you've created. I love stop
Yes.
motion. It's my favorite, to build your puppet and then be able to bring it to life and see everything that it does. It's like the most fulfilling thing ever.
Yeah. I mean, I think about what we did and what, people did until there was the advent of video playback and all that stuff. You just kind of go through the motions and you do the activity and you try to get the images on, but until the film's developed, you don't know whether it's good, bad, or, negligible. It's a tough form.
yeah.
I hats off to anybody who can do it well.
Well, Squirrely Puzzling, Lori's film that was accepted in North Festival. That's what, your third attempt at stop motion? Third or fourth?
It's my second. I did one, but it was a time lapse.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I've done 3 short films on puzzles. One without a tripod, taking pictures, and then the time lapse, and then this time with a tripod, and it was a lot smoother in my opinion.
Yep.
Still a couple shakes, but not too bad.
Yeah, Lori learned her lesson about not using a tripod with stop motion on the first film.
Oh, I could have told her that. I worked on Will Benton's very first film called Closed Mondays. And we were shooting Defula, Dennis.
Oh,
And back then, film work was so far, paid film work was so far and in between that we would shoot all day on Defula, and then we would go, and Tom Leitner would click the camera and I would move the clay figure just an increment. It
Wow.
was, so Lori, you can really go places from where you are right now. I'm gonna tell you, Will Benton ended up making such incredible films just starting where you are.
And she's got super strong calves as a result of doing it from all having to get up and down again from all not making a stop motion without using a tripod. So, and then Nina, you said that you were working on an upcoming film, or did you have a project you recently completed or anything?
Well, I'm just getting started. Well, I've been working kind of the last 3 years on a full-length feature film. It's been like getting the production design. I've been waiting on my writer to get the story finished so I could do the scripts. So it's been kind of slow. It's like getting little bits and pieces from him, but I finally got like half the stories. Like just started the scripts. It's not going to be filmed in Oregon though, unfortunately. It's going to be filmed in Japan. So
okay, well we also accept films that are shot outside of Oregon that are made by resident Oregon filmmakers.
okay.
So that could still be eligible. We've had films submitted from like Brazil and Europe and the East Coast where the filmmaker resides in Oregon, and that's still eligible.
Cool. I would have submitted some to this, but I missed the deadline. I didn't find the deadline until too late because I had 2 films that I just got back the results. I got best music video and best experimental short in a couple of different film festivals. So
Nice.
I'm just slowly getting my name out there, and I love stop motion. That's actually what I do the most. I just got best animated short at a film festival for a 30-second piece I did just stop motion. So
Nice. We do take music videos too. Last year we had an animated music video that was super cool. It was like a comic book style. And that filmmaker ended up taking 2nd place for best Northern short. So music videos are totally acceptable as well.
great. Good to know because I have a few more coming up.
Fantastic. Well, and those films, depending on when you completed them, they may still be eligible to submit next year. You can submit up to 2 films every year.
Okay, cool.
So the window for next year's film festival, I can't believe I'm talking about this already when we're 2 weeks away from this year's one. The window for next year's film festival is February 1st, 2023. So from Feb 1 to June 1, we accept submissions.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Anyone else have any announcements before we get to know our guest? I know we have a very small crew this time, so if not, hello, Dennis, and welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
So local ties. I know Dennis grew up in Lakeview, of all places.
Yes, I did.
Which of all places I ended up as well for a couple of years. It seems to be some sort of like universal crossroads that somehow, even though it's this little tiny place, somehow everyone that I encounter is either from there or knows someone from there or somehow passed through there at some point or another. It's really bizarre how I didn't even know it existed until I moved there, and now I can't escape it.
That's kind of typical, I think.
So did you graduate high school from there, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then you may be intrigued to know Bobby Steninger still teaches.
I know my is on the cross country team where she was, and then
Yes.
she's now up at George Fox University, but she knows Bobby well.
Yeah.
And
But-
I saw her just a few weeks ago and I thought, wow.
Yeah,
longevity.
It's crazy. She started teaching at the high school in Lakeview in 1961. They built the current high school in 1963,
Mhm.
and she still teaches there. So
Unbelievable.
yeah,
That's dedication.
yes. So out coming from Lakeview and then University of Oregon, correct?
Mhm.
So let's get kind of the background on how you got into film.
Well, I was a film nut from as far back as I can remember.
Going to the Alger.
Yep, going to the Alger. We lived in a suburb of Sacramento for like 2 years, from when I was 4 to when I was 6 years old. And I didn't see that many movies at that point because my mom and dad wouldn't, just drive me up and drop me off at a movie theater in Sacramento, which I appreciate that. But when we moved back to Lakeview when I was 6, I went pretty much every week, at least once. And that's, they changed out the programs a little bit more frequently back then, but you know, my family was close friends with the people who ran the theater. I ended up becoming close friends with the son of the people who ran the theater. And it was just someplace that I just gravitated to and never gravitated away from. You know, I'd go see whatever was on. So I just, you know, I saw a lot of films that I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise growing up like that. And then a lot of the movies that I saw there that I wasn't ready for when I went to college in Eugene, I was able to encounter both the movies again and people who knew the movies better than I did, and kind of guided me in certain ways of looking at things, exposing me to, you know, movies by directors who would become like dear friends to me in my heart. And so it was, you know, it was a natural progression, one that I was really grateful that I ended up doing, because when I graduated high school, I was only 16. So by the time I made it to U of O, I just turned 17. And a month into my adventures there, I met Catherine, and the whole Animal House experience happened. I love to tell this because I had a drama teacher in high school who was grooming me and grooming all of my friends. You got to go to Ashland because that's where the Oregon Shakespearean Festival is. They got a great drama program. Yeah, but Mrs. Corey, I'm really not interested in theater. No, you have to go to Ashland. You got to do this. In fact, she actually told me one time, you don't go to Ashland, you're going to cry yourself to sleep every night over your missed opportunity. And so a month into this, I go to audition casting call for the extras at Animal House, got the job. And for the next 2 months, I was juggling that with classes. And I just, every day I'd think to myself, gee, Mrs. Corey, here's an opportunity that nobody expected. You know, kind of glad I was available for that. And no regrets.
There's been a lot of films shot in Oregon, and I know Catherine's been responsible in part for a lot of those. I was born in 79, so I missed the whole Animal House experience by a year. But growing up in Eugene in the 80s, it was a big part of my childhood and remains so, obviously.
Yes, nice shirt.
You know,
Can I ask Dennis a question?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Was that Mrs. Wendell Corey?
No. This her name. Her name is Martha, and she was a big influence on me in a lot of ways as well. But yeah, she was a force of nature. Be one with me, and it didn't quite work out the way she wanted it to, but you know.
So while attending U of O, you were an extra in the film. What was your role?
I was a Delta Pledge. My favorite story about this is reading the casting call announcement in the Oregon Daily Emerald. And they said, you know, among other things, dress 60s. I go, okay, I don't know what to do.
Right.
So pulled a pair of pants and a shirt and a sweater out of my closet, went to the audition, and you know, there's however many there was 3,000 people there, Catherine, 5,000, something like that. 5, Jesus. And walked into the Herb Memorial Union, the student union, thinking, okay, well, this will be a fun experience. I won't get in, but it'll be interesting. And they basically paraded us in a line past the casting director, who was sitting at one of those big, intimidating, long tables. And he looked at me and he just said, take his picture. I go, I don't know what that means, but they went and took a Polaroid of me. And I guess I looked like I was walking out of the 60s with my own clothes because I got hired right then and there. And the funniest thing is that outfit is in the movie. So it really was convincingly outdated clothes that I was wearing as a freshman.
So the whole Animal House experience, of course, we got to talk about that all last month with Catherine about all the behind the scenes stuff. We'll find out more in a couple of weeks here at the film festival. But how did you go from just being a student into then, your lengthy career in film?
Well, I think to say that I have a career in film, an exaggeration,
Right?
to some degree. But I do work on the, as one of my colleagues once put it, in the armpit of. I work in. I do closed captions and subtitling for a lot of the major studios. I've done it for 35 years, and it was just kind of a result of saying to myself after I graduated school, I went back to Lakeview for 2 or 3 years, and that was
Why?
So I went over and lived in Medford for 3 years and worked in radio. I was on the air in a couple of radio stations over there, on air music director, pro director, whatever they wanted to plug me in as. And in 1987, I said, okay, I'm going to go to Los Angeles. I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I got started doing that work, and not thinking I was going to do it for more than 3 or 4 years. And here I am 35 years later still doing it. But, it sustained me. I met my wife through that. And I met an awful lot of great people through that. But that was kind of my transition to Los Angeles and being surrounded by the film community. I didn't really do much with it other than that until what year was it? 2004. And this was the start of the whole blogging revolution. And when everybody was starting to do it. And I started my own blog thinking again, I'll only have, the wherewithal and the energy to stick with this for about a year. And that was 18 years ago. And it's still up. Don't write for it as much as I used to. But there's 18 years worth of stuff that I'm in the process of trying to archive, and kind of thinking in terms of self-publishing a book or, doing something so that someday somebody doesn't just pull the plug on the website and all my stuff is gone.
Well, and you've also been a freelance writer for various magazines and websites and newspapers too, right?
Yes. Not freelance implies payment. And that doesn't happen very often. It hasn't happened that often for me, but I have been paid occasionally. One of the things that I did when I left Lakeview was I was at a friend. I went out to see a movie, and I ran into a couple of friends who I knew from Lakeview, and they said, "Why don't you write some stuff and take it to the Ashland Daily Tidings and see if you can get them to hire you as a film critic?" And so I said, gee, what a great idea. And I went home and sat there for a week and knocked some stuff together, walked into their office, and the editor of the arts magazine there hired me on the spot. So it's like, wow, okay. So that time, for 3 years, I got paid. Much more infrequently since then. All the stuff that I did for my blog, I did basically just because I had a need to.
And I really love the name of your website. Go ahead and share that. It's such a
Sure.
Such a random combination and yet intriguing.
Yeah, it is indeed. I have my card. So I don't know if it's showing back
Yep.
or not. Oh, well, it's Sergio Leone and the infield fly rule. The story behind that is that when I started this thing, I thought, oh, I'll write about movies and baseball. And it took me about 3 weeks, well, maybe a little longer than that, 4 weeks, to realize that as much as I love baseball, I wasn't much of a baseball writer or a baseball thinker. I was just much more of a fan. So I abandoned that and had an existential crisis. Oh, well, God, I've got to rename my blog. And so I kind of threw it open to the few readers that I had at the time for suggestions. And most of them said, leave it. It's a great name. And so I kind of wrote this short story sort of explaining what it was supposed to mean and stuff. And, you know, it's one of those things that people tend to remember, even though it makes them scratch their head.
Right. Yeah. Well, what does Clint Eastwood and a fistful of dollars have to do with baseball?
Yeah, right. Well, on my card, you can see Clint's holding a baseball.
Right.
So, you know, who knows? Who knows what they did on the sets of Sergio Leone movies?
But you've also you've written for things like Slate Magazine, correct?
Yeah.
And other publications as a known film critic,
Right.
correct? So
Yes.
how does one become a film critic, and what are the credentials or the essentials of being a good film critic,
Well,
aside of having a thumb?
yeah, exactly. I think one of the things that's happened because of the internet and the blogosphere, as we used to refer to it, is that, you know, it gave voice to a lot of people who were really smart and impassioned about what they wanted to write about, be it film or whatever. But particularly in film criticism, it kind of had a negative effect in that everybody has a voice, which is a great thing. And everybody has the ability to write and publish on the internet, which is a good thing. And it's also a bad thing, because for every really good writer that you get, there's 5 or 6 others who are just interested in, you know, coughing up gossip or industry, you know, numbers or whatever. And, you know, you can tell right away if you follow any of these, you know, blogs with any kind of frequency, it's really easy to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And also the other thing, so, you know, you got a lot of people who are writing who may have the passion for movies, but their history with the medium becomes apparent. I mean, I can think of a lot of people, especially now, who are writing who don't appear to have seen anything that was released before 1990. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, oh gosh, have you heard about this Goodfellas movie? Really great. So, you know, that's what you're kind of up against in a lot of ways. And the other bad thing that happened from the rise of blogging and that kind of thing is that it really put a pinch on the profession of a professional film critic. I mean, with all these opinions and all this writing now suddenly available for free, basically, it caused a lot of publications and a lot of editors to kind of devalue the people who they had on staff, who were doing great work, but they were perceived as, you know, intellectuals or, you know, elitists or, you know, just out of touch with the audience in some way. And so over the past 15 years or so, you're seeing a lot of these film critics getting dropped from newspapers, and newspapers either going with syndicated, you know, syndicated writing and getting rid of their local film critics, or just not covering films at all. And, you know, it was kind of a sad thing to see that happen, because I knew had got quite a few people, you know, through, you know, my own writing, and made my way into, you know, audiences and friendships with several of the people who I had admired for years and years and years, and got to see them find themselves kind of unmoored in the profession that they, you know, thought they'd be in forever.
It is interesting how that has changed. I mean, anyone who's my age or even a bit younger grew up watching Siskel and Ebert on TV every single week. And that would largely be the basis of, do I want to go see this movie in the theater or not, based on if Siskel and Ebert liked it. And then later Ebert and Roper, of course, after Gene Siskel died. But then, as MySpace and blogging sites came along, suddenly everyone had an opportunity to chime in. You're correct. And then even in recent years, we've seen where maybe the audience has been emboldened by thinking that the studios will listen to whatever they have to say as soon as a trailer comes out. In fact, so I'm friends with the writers of the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, and Pat and Josh, after many years of struggle, finally had a hit and then another hit. Thank God, right? But it's kind of funny how there was so much backlash against Sonic when the first trailer came out, that the studio, so many people that you're talking about created uproar that it made the studio want to go back and fix it. And, you know, Pat and Josh were involved in some of that process too. They of course weren't designing it. They were writing it, but still they're very thankful that people spoke up, because it turned it into a much better film. And now they even made fun of Bad Sonic in the most recent, the Chippendales film, that they brought Bad Sonic in just to kind of, you know, poke fun at that. But there's also been, you know, so that's a good example. But there's also been some bad examples of this that have kind of just simply based on hype of people, you know, hating on something because they feel emboldened like they can, has also really wrecked the box office for a lot of potential films that have come out too.
Yeah. And you see the rise of, you know, this kind of thing with all the, you know, when studios are putting out basically only superhero films in theater,
Right.
you know,
It's safe.
Everybody's
they only want to ride the safe line.
Yeah, exactly. And so you got people analyzing the trailers and what does this mean, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And that's kind of how it's gone. I mean, you know, you could tell right away, you know, when I started, and even when, you know, through the years as I kept going, which writers were interested in films and which writers were interested in becoming consumer advocates. You know, how should I go see this movie? When I started, I would write routinely 3, 4, 5,000 word pieces sometimes and put them up, and my friends would go, who the hell is going to want to read it? and I kind of go, well, that's a good question. And then I realized that my answer was whoever wants to read it. And my intent is not to become, you know, a famous film critic, although I did end up getting some sort of notoriety and notice because of it. But that wasn't my intention. My intention was to write things for people who would be interested in reading what I wrote, and interested in reading the kind of ideas that I was putting out. So I didn't worry about whether I was writing about, you know, a 5-minute French short, or, you know, a big blockbuster. I didn't restrict myself to writing just about movies. I had, you know, I wrote about a lot of things that I thought about, criticism, you know, a lot of things. I wrote about Animal House quite a bit, as a matter of fact. over the years. And so not but it's like I just decided that, you know, I wouldn't concern myself with any kind of idea of demographics or, you know, whatever I thought I expected people to be interested in. I'd throw it out there, and if people found their way to it, they would, and they did eventually. My blog was never like a, you know, huge numbers kind of a thing, but it did get noticed by Film Comment magazine, which called it one of the best blogs in the country about 10 years ago. I was mentioned right alongside Roger Ebert and a film critic I really respect out of Washington named Jim Emerson. I was mentioned with the three of them in the New York Times, for crying out loud. And it's like nothing that I, you know, went out and trolled for or anything. It just kind of happened, and which kind of made me all the more glad for that, because it wasn't, you know, it was genuine what they were saying. It wasn't something.
And it's led to side gigs of writing for magazines and writing for, you know, prominent publications as well, where they respect your voice as a film critic to present your opinion on stuff when you've been asked to do that content. So does anyone have questions for Dennis? I don't want to hog the whole conversation here. Nina or Lori or Joyce and Howard?
Yeah, I got a question, Dennis.
Sure.
So I'm curious what your writing process is. How do you get ready or prepared to write, and you know what you need, if you will?
It's really interesting because I don't know that I can say I have a process as such. I'll have an idea about something that I want to write about. Like a few weeks ago, I woke up thinking, I'd like to write about Ken Russell's Listomania, which is a movie that is almost universally despised. I love it. And so I woke up, and I'll often wake up writing it in my head. I'll be laying in bed at 5 o'clock in the morning, and yeah, that works. And then I'll get up, take a shower, and come in and just start banging things out without any kind of like outline or anything like that. And I'll just kind of go and go and go until it feels like I should stop. And which is why, you know, you get like 4,000 or 5,000 word pieces sometimes. Fortunately, I've been lucky enough to work with a couple of editors who said, nah, we don't need that much. We can hold back on that a little bit. The first
that sounds very much along the Kerouac or Hunter S. Thompson style of gonzo writing. Just sit down and go, and whatever gets, you know, comes out of from the brain to the fingertips is whatever goes on the page.
I mean, I'm not like doing a Burroughs, you know, cut up my words and toss them in the air and then pick out what comes out. But it's like it's very loose in terms of that. I don't frequently go into anything with any kind of an outline or anything like that. Just a basic. What I'll do is I'll write down 4 or 5 points that I want to make, and I'll just start writing and finding my way to them. And you know, I'm lucky enough that I have a wife who's an English major from UCLA. So she's willing to proofread my stuff and say, get rid of that. Or, you know, you can hack that completely out. Or what's this run-on sentence where, you know, so, you know, and that happens a lot. But I have in recent years become a little bit more modest with the length of the stuff I put out. I write every year roundups for Slant magazine for the Turner Classic Film Festival. And my first year of doing that, I turned in to my extremely indulgent editor a piece that ran 29,000 words. I literally documented every step I took in that festival. I was so excited because I'd never been to a big film festival before. So I was like, this is all going down. I'm going to tell you about the street dog that I ate after I saw, Modesty Blaze. And I did. And I gave it to him and he published it. I couldn't believe it. 29,000 words. And I thought myself, hey, that's pretty neat. And then I thought, oh my God, am I going to have to do this next year? So by a process of, self-preservation and everything else, I just started to winnow it down. And now, my editor looks at me last year and I said, well, so you want about 3,000 words? Not maybe so much as that. So I had to restrict myself to 2,000 words. And that was, for a blowhard like me, that's pretty tough.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
At the University of Oregon, weren't you trained in film?
Yeah.
I mean, you were part of that whole thing going on with, God, I can't remember his name now.
Bill Cadbury was,
yeah,
Bill Cadbury was one of my professors, and Gene Cutler, and there was a lot of people that had a big influence on me. Yeah, I went right into University of Oregon as a film major, not really knowing, what I wanted to do with it or anything like that. I just wanted the education. And that was one of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of just broadening my mind. I mean, I went in with a very narrow view from living in Lakeview for 16 years of what it was that I liked and what I thought I liked, and just having the experience of saying, oh, gee, I liked MASH, I hated Nashville, and then I see Brewster McCloud out of nowhere. It's like, oh my God, this movie is fantastic. And then it caused me to turn around and look at Nashville, which I saw when I was 15 and not ready for it. It's now my favorite movie. I've probably seen it 40 times.
It is, and I don't think there's a lot of, and one of the reasons why I was intrigued about your story when we had the opportunity to have you on here is I feel like a lot of the people who are professional film critics out there went to J school. They went to journalism school and they just kind of fell into writing about film. Not a lot of them have gone to film school and understand the inner workings. They can look at a film and take it apart in terms of comparisons to other films and how they feel structure should be and how writing should be and how acting should be by comparison to other things. But without knowing necessarily how the sausage is made, you can't fully appreciate the process. Like what we were talking about half an hour ago with even if a stop motion film is not a good film, it's still like, but the process they did to make that makes me still appreciate it because I know how much work went into that.
Exactly.
Do you think that maybe helps setting you apart from some of your peers in terms of having a film production and film school background that lets you better comprehend and understand cinema than others who may have just gone to journalism school?
I think in terms of just like what I think about personally, maybe it does. And I think it's probably most valuable to other people looking at me and going, oh, well, he must, not just be some guy off the street. He may have some sort of knowledge, to what you're saying in terms of how films are made. But I think that the dirty secret of film school is that a lot of times, especially now, your typical film student, that's all they know. They don't have a background in literature. They don't have a background in, I don't know, any of the subjects that you might expect somebody with a well-rounded knowledge of the world to have. The film school experience, as it's become more and more important, it's also become more and more insular, I think. When I was going to film school, nobody expected me or anybody else to, go out and become the next George Lucas or anything like that. We were there to learn about the form, and we had very little production experience. I think I had maybe 2 semesters where I had my hands on a Bolex 16mm camera. The rest of it was very criticism oriented. And I think that was partially due to just the fact that there was no budget to do anything else. So they maximized their kick there by making sure that all their students were exposed to all kinds of stuff that they wouldn't have been otherwise. But I think, I wouldn't want to overrate my own experience as, a film school graduate in terms of where it's taken me, because I can't really say with any kind of certainty. But I don't regret for a minute, being able to say that this was where I was for 4 of the most formative years of my life. And as film schools go, to your point, Kurt, I don't think there was a better one than my 2 months on the set of Animal House. I mean, you want to find out how things were made, you find out the technical stuff, but you also find out that you have to stand around and wait for 6 hours.
That too.
Before anything gets done. And it's like, if that's not a lesson that will weed out the wannabes from the true believers, I don't know what would be.
You also have the path that a lot of people have of not sure what to do. Maybe I'll just move to LA and ... famous. And I like to say often that the streets of Los Angeles are paved with the crushed dreams of the young and naive.
Oh boy.
I'm one of I never had any expectation of being famous. I always wanted to work behind the scenes, but still, what I remind people is, you may see the names on the marquee for the lucky few who have become famous, but when you watch a movie, it takes 10 minutes for all the names to go by.
Right.
There's a lot of people. The majority of the industry are the people behind the scenes. It's not the quote unquote stars that, maybe walking the red carpet. It's those 1,000+ names that go by, with every single one of them playing an important part in making that production happen. And so you being a part of that for 30 years is, you have your part in the industry. Like most people that I got to know and really respected in the industry weren't necessarily the superstars that I worked with. They were the ones that have been doing it for decades of hair and makeup and costumes and set designers and all those people that are behind the scenes that really are, I'm sure I've said this before, and I sound like a broken record probably to Joyce and Howard and Lori, who are always on these meetings, but the real rock stars on set are like the hair and makeup and costume and grips, because they're the first ones there and they're the last ones to leave, and absolutely nothing happens without them.
And they're the least glamorous folks on the set too.
It's a t-shirt and jeans crowd, like 24/7.
Right.
So,
which is why I relate. I get that.
Don't forget the music supervisors.
Yes.
The sound on a film is a totally another layer of unpacking the film. And Kurt, when you said that you did some music supervising, that's the guy I have the most respect for right now, after working with a music supervisor on Animal House of Blues.
Yeah. My role there for several years was music supervisor for production libraries specifically. So basically think of me as like being an audio librarian in charge of hundreds of thousands of recordings and working with studios and directors and ad agencies and whoever needs music to find that exact perfect piece to match the mood and shot and beats per minute that they need, that just fully accents. Because I've always felt that audio is what sets the emotional tone in film, not the visuals.
Yep.
And so finding that exact piece with just the right instrumentation and the exact right, all the elements coming together that then create that perfect emotion is kind of an art in of itself, of sift through 500,000 tracks and find the one that works.
And would you Kurt, as a music supervisor, would you be involved with securing rights and things like that as well?
Yeah, so
Sounds to me like that's the biggest tangle.
yeah, so a lot of it was licensing, but first it was about finding the right piece and then making it work after the fact for whatever they needed in terms of dollars and making sure it was cleared. We also had in-house studios, so we'd also record custom stuff. You've actually been hearing my voice for years. Lori knows this, and Howard and Joyce might too. Occasionally I would sing on like commercial jingles. It typically is just the demo that they'd ask me to come in, and if the client liked it, then we'd hire someone professionally. But every now and then they liked my demo version so much, they were just like, that's perfect, keep it. And so for the last, oh God, I don't know, decade at least, you've been hearing me as the "We Are Farmers" bum 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 guy.
Oh,
Yeah. Myself and two other guys at Elias Arts thought it was the single dumbest thing we'd ever recorded ever, and the client would never go for it. And they're like, it's perfect, we'll keep it. Like, great. Okay. So yeah, that's me. I also sang on a regional, well, not regional, a national Toyota commercial that's been running for Christmas, during Christmas time, for like 10 years, of trying to imitate Sinatra the best that, or the worst that I possibly could. And Toyota, for some reason, keeps running it over and over again. But I mean, that, like you, I was always one of those behind the scenes people, right? So like, and Catherine too, you know, all those people that do the heavy lifting to make the magic happen. For the one or two stars of a film, there's hundreds, if not 1,000+ people behind the scenes. And James Ivory once told me a couple of years ago when he was visiting here in town that it takes every single one of those names in the credits for a film to be successful. And if one of them is not bought in, the film is doomed to fail.
And I think that's one of the things that I find frustrating, especially about, I mean, I've always found it frustrating with audiences, but now I find it frustrating with films themselves in backloading all the credits at the end, including the directors and the producers and the writers and everything else. We're so allergic to the main title sequence now that, you know, you could watch a movie and then the credits start coming up and there's this exodus of people leaving the theater, and maybe 5 or 6 of them are going to hang around and watch, you know, to see who did what.
I do greatly appreciate what the Deadpool movies did to
Yes.
kind of counteract that a little bit, though.
Yep.
Make fun of the Hollywood industry.
Oh, yeah.
In the course of things. I don't want to hog this conversation. Nina, you've been quiet, or Howard and Joyce, anything that you want to chime in with or ask?
Something went. Yeah.
Sounds like Howard had a question. Maybe. Okay.
I have another question. While we're
Oh,
waiting.
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm interested, Dennis. So you mentioned, you know, that there had been some critique or, you know, potential rejections along the way, you know, every once in a while, or, you know, your blog, you had supportiveness, but maybe you also had some issues where there wasn't. So I guess I just wanted to know, like, if you want to share any of those instances and sort of how you work through it and, you know, made so it was helpful in improvement maybe versus just get really negative and down about it.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things that I kind of learned right away, is that no matter how well I express myself, or, you know, what in how I carry my ideas out, there's always going to be somebody who says, nah, well, you don't know what you're talking about, or, you know, I don't agree. And, you know, starting out, I was always kind of sensitive about that and everything, or worried that, oh God, I just, you know, came out in defense of this movie that everybody hates, and now I'm going to really hear it. And, you know, you'd get comments back and everything, but, and, you know, obviously there were times when, you know, the people who were reading the thing said, no, you're off base. And then, you know, there would be a conversation, which I often found was really interesting, as long as, you know, the person coming on the comment wasn't trying to, you know, attack or make some hay for themselves or anything like that. As far as my blog, you know, that was kind of the mediating force for me. I didn't have an editor. I was my editor. And like I said, my wife would help me out and read my pieces and stuff. So it wasn't until I really started to write a little bit more for outside publications and stuff, where I got a taste of what it was like to work with somebody who didn't have, you know, an emotional stake in what I'd written, or, you know, wasn't seeing it from the inside of my head. It could be completely objective. And that was more difficult, but it was, you know, if you approach it with the right kind of attitude, it can also be probably one of the most valuable things that you can experience as a writer, is somebody who's interested in making your work as good as it can be, who doesn't have, you know, the same stake in it that you do. So, you know, a lot of times I'll submit like my pieces for the Turner Classic Film Festival, and I'll get them back and there'll be all this red ink and they'll want all this stuff out. And it's like, oh God, but I thought that was pretty good. And, you know, there'll be a back and forth, and, you know, he almost always wins, but that's the way it goes. But I do think that that's an important thing. And I think that a lot of the writers who are writing for internet sites and their own blogs and stuff like that are sometimes deprived of that sort of discipline in terms of being able to stand back from their own work and say, you know, I should have done it this way, or just being open to the fact that maybe they didn't express themselves as well as they thought they did, or just being open to ideas that maybe they could have done instead of what they did. You know, it's like, I just think that secondary voice is really important. And I don't know that, you know, a lot of the writers that I really admire and everything are professionals there, and sometimes they work in the same kind of medium that I've been working in, but they all have that experience of working with editors at, you know, the New Yorker or, you know, Newsweek or someplace like that, where, you know, you can't just toss something in and expect it to fly. There's, you know, there's a real give and take there. And I was glad to find that out for my own sake.
Cool. It sounded like Howard was trying to ask a question before, but he was cutting off. Are Howard and Joyce back?
Yeah, we're back. Curious question about the powers insurance. The, for lack of a better term, my understanding is that the was as a result of a dispute with the AFM. Are you aware of?
Howard, we're only picking up a couple words from you. Could you talk a little closer to the mic, please?
Okay, question again, and I hope this is better. Question about the State Farm insurance commercial,
Oh, gee.
music thing, which is voice and not music. My understanding is that those voices were as a result of a dispute with the AFM. Can you comment on that?
I don't know all the insider stuff. I was in my office and they said, hey, can you come in and record something for a couple of minutes? I went in and they told me what I was supposed to record. I was like, are you kidding me? Or something all along those lines. Fine, whatever. We did like 10 takes of it. And then they put a whole bunch of effects on our voices and we walked out and went back to work. And then I started hearing it on TV and I'm like, really? And then 10 years later, I'm still hearing it on TV. I'm like, when's my residual check can actually show up for this? Because I was on salary at the time. They just, I got one paycheck for it and that was it. So they keep using the exact same recording again and again. They haven't stopped yet. But Damien, Mitch, and myself at Elias Arts recorded that in 2012, 2011 ish, sometime around that sounds about right. I have no idea on the background of it or the specifics on it. It's just one of those weird claim to fames that everyone has if you spend enough time in the entertainment industry in LA. Somehow, some way you end up in something.
Yeah, good. I hear you on that. And my understanding is that the reason doing what you did was because the powers that be, had a dispute with the AFM, and they could not use musicians. So they decided to use the voice to avoid the AFM contract.
Oh, okay. Well, I worked for two different music houses for several years. I worked for a company called Megatrax and a company called Elias Arts, and they're two of the top tier. There's lots of production libraries out there. A lot of what they do are what's known as sound alikes. So like if there's a really popular song, but the film or TV show or commercial can't necessarily afford paying that very popular artist for that song, they will have people record something that is reminiscent of it, but not close enough to necessarily be sued. And so like you turn on TV and, a month ago, there was a super popular song and now there's a TV commercial or a sitcom or something that has something that kind of sounds in that same vein, but it's not quite that. It's usually a production library that has done that. Our companies we would sit down and have meetings of trying to discuss, do we have music of every possible genre imaginable, or looking at not just what's popular right now, but what's going to be popular in 6 months from now. So keeping a close eye on terms of new artists emerging and new sounds emerging, and then distributing that out to our session musicians to then write material similar to it while also recording everything imaginable, so that when Warner Brothers or Fox or whomever would call me and say, we're working on this and it's, I don't know, set in Central Africa, we need Zimbabwean folk music that has this specific instrumentation. And I could say, we have 5 tracks. Here you go. See which one works best for you. If you like it, you pay us a licensing fee. That's primarily what I did, was basically compiling, sorting, and keeping track of hundreds of thousands of recordings, so that when a random director or studio or someone like Catherine would call me and say, I'm working on this, I need something like this, I could go, well, here's a whole collection of tracks and I hope you like them. And if you want to, sometimes I would edit them into their rough cuts. If you like it, great. Then, pay us for using it in your project, and, we'll move on from there. So I can't speak to all of the musician disputes. I do remember when that was happening in LA. So I know what you're talking about, Howard, but I wasn't part of those conversations. I just got called into the studio one day, and 10 years later, I'm still hearing my voice on TV almost every single day.
Cool. I love it. And I'm not putting you down for anything you've done. My impression is, and I'd like to have it confirmed by someone who's able to confirm it, that happened during the era, I believe, of Petrillo, who was obviously the really strong advocate of the AFM, who said that the music from his musicians could not be used without significant pay, I guess. Now that's probably, and they decided then, whoever produced the spot, to use the voices as an affront to the AFM.
I can't speak to it. I don't know any details about it. I mean, we would work with all kinds of ad agencies. We did a lot of audio branding. So the idea of, you know, a brand name or a slogan for a company, and then creating a sound that when you hear, you associate it. So like NBC, you think NBC, you go bomb, 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 you know, that kind of thing. We did a lot of that stuff of creating sounds that when you hear that sound, you would associate it with a brand. So I know there was some disputes with musicians at the time, but that's also why the companies I worked for would have in-house recording studios and on-staff musicians. So we'd just be recording music all day.
Right. Yeah, good stuff. And I don't know the answer to my question. Obviously, you were just
Yeah.
involved in what you all did, which is cool. I have no problem with that. I just am interested in the origin of
Right.
where voice tone came to replace the instrumental.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I got called into the studio for 5 minutes and then left and thought that nothing more of it. But we would get odd questions, you know, folks like Catherine, and I know Catherine has a good music background as well, so she wouldn't do this. But other people, sometimes being music supervisors, kind of like being a translator. Like you're having to take in what people are trying to describe, what they're hearing in their head, but not knowing the music lexicon for it, and then translate that to the musicians to record it, and then come back to the people and say, is this what you were thinking of? Like I remember vividly, I once had someone call me and say that they needed something that sounded yellow. What does yellow sound like to you? And so I had to, and I knew that I could hear that they're like struggling through the phone of like, I need something that sounds like it needs to be yellow in sound. I'm like, okay, what do they mean? What are they trying to say? And that something sounds yellow. How does a color translate to noise? And so then I had to try to figure out what yellow was, what they were hearing in their head for what they wanted for their film. That's what good music supervisors do. So hopefully, Catherine, you're working with a good one.
Oh, the best, Patrick Cleary at BMG.
Oh, terrific.
But I want to say that what that all is what the studios do. You know, there's a new hip hop artist with a new sound. That's what the studios do. It's like independent filmmakers come up with these wonderful new films. And Dennis's and my generation, you know, came out of poetic cinema, and the new Hollywood was not the sound of music anymore. It was, you know, Midnight Cowboy, you know, the only X-rated movie ever got an Academy Award, the first one. And all of a sudden they go, well, give me a Midnight Cowboy. That's what the studios would do. They were mimicking, you know? And so I totally get what our guest was talking about. It kind of, you know, pisses me off because we've all had ideas stolen from the studios. They submit a script and it's a really unique idea, and they go, make this into something different so we don't get sued. But it doesn't come from this artistic place. It doesn't come from the magic of art. It comes from mimicking.
If anything, it's gotten worse because so much is driven by box office. And now that album sales have basically fallen off a cliff in terms of a revenue source, films have become a great way to break an artist. And so once something comes out that's unique and different, suddenly everyone has to do it again and do it again and again. Animal House is a great example of that, because look at all of the college and high school hijinks films that came out from like 79 through about like 85 or 86, where the film that you two worked on basically set the template for, I mean, Dennis, you and I can probably go down the list, like Zapped, Last American Virgin. You could even say Fast Times at Ridgemont High to an extent was influenced by Animal House. A bunch of really bad college movies, Revenge of the Nerds, Hard Bodies, Joysticks,
The Academy.
Yeah, I mean, throw some more names out there, Dennis. You're the film critic, not me. But I mean, we can go through a whole laundry list of early '80s Meatballs. I mean, all of those films that basically saw the huge success of Animal House and this kind of anti-authoritarianism, high school, college, early 20s crowd that are kind of the outcasts, that was essentially Animal House, and they tried to do it for a lot less money and not as well done. And all those films have not aged well. I have a lot of them on Laserdisc. I go back and watch them like, what the hell were people thinking in the early 80s? So some of these films are just, whoa, there'd be so many problems if you tried to, like a month or two ago, I watched the movie Private Lessons again. It's a film celebrating a 15-year-old having sex with his maid.
Yeah.
And making him out to be like the hero. I'm like, you don't make that film today. I'm sorry, no.
Well, you don't make Animal House today.
True.
We found out, when that movie came out and had its 40th anniversary, it was eviscerated in the Oregon magazine, the magazine of the University of Oregon, as a
Racist, misogynistic.
Yeah.
By the head of the cinema department. And I went on NPR and I unpacked the film for him and I let him have it.
Good.
Remember that?
Yes. And I wrote one of my 6,000 or 7,000 word articles
Beautiful.
to that too. And I just thought, this is nuts. This is not, talk about all the other influences that the movie has had, and we just did. And that's, that's what it is, because that's a whole different thing that's an offshoot of, exploiting a movie that was a huge unexpected hit. And of course, that's going to be the pattern. You're going to see movies 30, 40 years down the road that are obviously influenced by it. And they're responsible for what they're responsible for. But I just thought that the claims that were being made against this movie, basically, the bottom line was, it's just not funny. As if suddenly, we'd all had the veil lifted from our eyes and can now see that this thing was never any good to begin with. And I just was utterly offended by that.
You were offended by the PC crowd.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, there's a lot of points that could be made that could have been made a lot more eloquently, rather than just, like you were being witness to somebody just bashing this movie over the head with the nearest blunt instrument.
Well, and if they want to take that route, they might as well eviscerate every movie ever made before like 1990. I think Dances with Wolves was a real watershed moment in Hollywood history, where for the first time they said, okay, let's not just villainize everyone. The history of like white actors in blackface and like even films that are still celebrated that people haven't watched in a long time, if they actually went back and rewatched them, I'd bring up to this group often. Breakfast at Tiffany's is a film that universally people love until you go back and watch it and see Mickey Rooney's performance and go, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, and then the back end of that is that if you try to watch, I don't know if you've tried lately to watch Blazing Saddles.
Oh yeah, love it. And the same saying is you could never make that movie today.
Exactly.
But Pryor said at the time you couldn't make that movie then either.
Yeah. And yet, you see TCM will run like a 4-minute explanation of what you're going to see, and and beware. And it's one of the great anti-racist comedies ever made. It may be the great anti-racist comedy. And yet we're so scared of hearing things that might make us nervous, or, it's just unbelievable to me that the things that get targeted are almost always the wrong things. There's lots of evidence of things that could probably, use a spanking. But, when it comes to a movie like that, it's like, come on. Tell me what you're actually seeing here.
Everything happens at a different time, and people need to let go and understand that was a different generation. Things were different then. You have to understand that was the time, and that had a valid point at that time. And things change as they go through. And PCU, have you ever seen that movie?
Love it.
Oh, yes.
it's a great movie because it shows you exactly how silly being politically correct has gotten.
And
I love
another
that
great
movie.
example of an Animal House influenced film.
Exactly. But it's like everything happens at a time, and people just need to understand, okay, yes, it probably shouldn't have been made, but it was a great movie. But you got to just move past it. Okay, look at it for this, not for that. And that's what a lot of people forget. about this.
Actually,
It hurts.
I told Dr. Aronson that obviously he hadn't unpacked the film. Because Dennis, you were taught, you know, Bill Cadbury taught film as literature. And you had to have a background in literature and in classics to understand what that was a totally new angle.
Yep.
But I took philosophy, and I told Dr. Aronson that obviously he didn't know anything about archetype. And I ended up quoting Joseph Campbell, about, you know, what the deltas represented was a very old, deep archetype. And no wonder they'll never hire me there. But I also want to say, Lori brought up a really great question, Dennis, for you. And I
Yes.
really want to hear the answer to that. It's on the chat. Can you see it?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. So Lori put in the chat, Dennis mentioned about writing a book from his long-term blog. I'm wondering how difficult it is in deciding what to put in or not into the book, because you've been doing this for like 18 years. Or is this going to be like a 10-book series of your entire writing experience? I'm interested in hearing more details on this project and the process.
Well, I don't really know much about the process in terms of what it is to self-publish or anything like that, because I haven't really gotten that far yet. Basically, what I've done is to try to figure out how I would structure the book. I mean, I write, like I said, I've written a lot of things about specific movies. I've written a lot of things about specific phenomenon that were happening in film culture at that time. I've written a lot of stuff about questions that I had about why I wanted to see something and why I wouldn't see it. So a lot of, you know, what they'd call think pieces, you know, and also one of the things that I did when I first started was I was just looking for something to post, you know, oh, wow, God, what can I post? And I came up with this idea of doing film quizzes that weren't quizzes that had specific right or wrong answers. They were more designed almost as if the person taking them were being interviewed. So I would say, you know, what's the second greatest movie Clint Eastwood directed? And then you'd get discussion about their favorite, but then you'd get the discussion about their second favorite. All the questions that I put together were always real open and open-ended like that. And so of all these different kinds of things that I wrote about, I envision taking those and putting them in separate sections within the same book. 18 years is a lot of material, and a lot of just go, nah, nobody's going to want to read that. But a lot of it, I think, holds up pretty well. And if you're a writer, you'll know the instinct or the feeling of writing something that you're really proud of, and then 3 years later looking at it and going, oh my God, what in the hell was I thinking? That happens when I'm looking back on it, but surprisingly, it doesn't happen as much as I thought it would.
I think that happens with a lot of filmmakers too. A lot of
Yeah.
a lot of our early projects we don't want anyone to see.
Exactly.
It's a process of learning how to do it, not for public
Yeah.
display.
I'd say like that's true for like maybe the first 2 or 3 years of what when I was writing. I was just trying to figure out what my voice was. I didn't want it to sound like somebody else. I didn't want to put on airs and make myself sound like I was some deep thinker or something like that. And so I was, you know, kind of flounder a little bit. You know, some of the things that I wrote were kind of half baked, and, you know, I'd look at that and go, yeah, okay, well, I can see that I stayed up that night and I wanted to bang this thing out, and I probably should have spent 3 or 4 more hours on it. And there's all kinds of examples of that at the beginning, especially. So I'm, in the process of weeding all that stuff out. But what I also want to do, so much of the blogging experience that, as I experienced it, was, in 2004, that was kind of when things were really kind of kick-starting with the forum. So there were a lot of people who were writing their own blogs who have gone on to do professional writing in all kinds of different venues. And we kind of all got to know each other. We interacted. We would have these things called blogathons, where one of us would say, okay, everybody's going to get together on this date and we're all going to write about Robert Aldrich and pick a movie. And so that's what we would do. And so we got to know each other, that way. And basically, you kind of I learned a lot just by interacting with people and other writers and other people who would comment on my blog. As the blog progressed, maybe, I don't know, halfway through 10 years or so, comments started to kind of drop off. And you could see that energy was being fed into places like Facebook and things like that. So a lot of what I see for my own writing now, I'll put a link to it, or I'll just write something and slap it on Facebook. And that's where the interaction that I used to get on the blog comes from primarily. I hardly ever see a comment on my blog anymore, but that's okay, because a lot of the stuff that I cherished about it to begin with came in those comments columns. And so I want to save some space for that in the book as well. So it's kind of, I've got my daughter helping me archive all this stuff right now. And then the big deal is going to be looking through all of it and deciding, what to get rid of. So I don't imagine it's going to be a huge volume or anything, or like a multi-volume kind of situation. It's not, I'd have to be, a megalomaniac far greater than I am in order to do something like that.
This coming from the person who submitted a 29,000 word article, though.
Right, exactly. Read me.
And Dennis, I live on a farm with a publisher.
Ah,
And if I could ever be of help, I've now published 3 books, and
right.
I keep going the best of Sergio Leone and the Infield Fly Rule, and just hit me up.
Yeah, okay.
I
That's essentially what it would be.
Dennis, I also thought of the perfect piece that is both film and baseball for your blog too, addressing the hypocrisy of cancel culture trying to eliminate old Hollywood for not fitting current norms.
Yes.
Comparable to clear baseball Hall of Famers being denied acceptance into the Hall because people don't like their personality all of a sudden. Where if someone like Curt Schilling, for example, I vehemently disagree with almost everything he says too, but statistically, he still deserves to be a Hall of Famer, and yet is not, because all of a sudden now there's this culture, and yet they don't have a problem. These same people saying they shouldn't be a Hall of Famer because they're not a nice person. Well, look back at the history of baseball in the same way of history of Hollywood. For someone like Ty Cobb, unquestionably to still be in the Hall of Fame, and yet be quite possibly the worst person to ever put on a professional sports uniform, to be that hated in 1910, really says what kind of a terrible person you have to be, considering the history of America at the time. And yet there's no one saying he should be revoked from being a baseball Hall of Famer because he was such an awful person when he was alive.
Right.
The same connections you could make to the discussions about Animal House not being appropriate anymore, or Blazing Saddles not being okay, or my constant example of, hey, you really need to go back and watch Breakfast at Tiffany's if you want a good example of Asian American appropriation.
Yeah. Well, that movie in particular is strange because that characterization comes out of nowhere.
Right. And
There's
it's totally
nothing.
unnecessary to the entire
Yeah.
film too.
Yeah, there's just nothing there to justify it.
But there's all sorts of crazy history of old Hollywood being really, I mean, I point out a lot too, the fact that John Wayne once played Genghis Khan. I mean, there's a lot of inappropriate things in American history and film history and global history. And just because it may not be appropriate today doesn't mean that we have to completely eliminate it from.
Correct. I mean, I think that's where I think the discussion, the TCM's angle is, I think, essentially the right angle in terms of trying to contextualize what you're seeing, because TCM has got a library full of stuff that's just horrifying if you watch it with 21st century eyes. We're working on featurettes for Holiday Inn right now, Bing Crosby, Fred Astaire, and it's got one of the most grotesque blackface sequences in it that you'll ever see. And yet we're not going to toss that in the trash or say that it's, a completely reprehensible thing. We should be talking about it and understanding that, yeah, in 1940, there was a lot of stuff going on like this that was just, even in 1940 wasn't acceptable to most people, but but it, obviously it was acceptable enough that, Bing Crosby didn't mind getting into blackface.
Yeah.
So, it's something that needs to be talked about, and to pretend that it didn't exist or hide it away is not the way to go.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions here? Nina, you've been pretty quiet. I mean, I appreciate you kind of hanging in there, but is there anything you wanted to chime in with? I want to make sure you get a chance to speak.
Oh, no, I'm usually pretty quiet. I like to listen a lot, but no, I was just, what Dennis says was about things. I agree. I don't think things should be forgotten. They need to be talked about. If you take it away, unfortunately, people are stupid enough to do it again.
Oh, yes.
So that's why everything I see is that you've got to remember our history. Everything has a purpose. You got to keep it flowing and talk about it. Move past it and understand, yes, it shouldn't have happened, but now we need to move forward and go from there. And that's the one thing that just seems people need to talk about it, because there's a lot of things that are made nowadays too that it's like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I was curious too about your process for movies. Like what movies do you gravitate towards to like write about? I mean, like what influences you or grabs your sense the most?
Well, one of the things that I discovered when I started writing about stuff like, just regularly, was that it was much harder to write about something that I really loved, as opposed to writing about something that I had disregard for, or I could knock off 5 or 6 snarky lines and build a piece around that. I mean, believe me, I've written some articles about movies that I didn't like that were far too easy to write. and conversely, I'll be confronted with something that I really love that hits me in lots of different ways and gets at me in ways that I may not even fully understand. And that's one of the greatest challenges for me as a writer, is figuring out how to express why I love something like Listomania, or, I think that 1941 is my absolute favorite Steven Spielberg movie. Another movie that wouldn't necessarily exist without.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some issues with it for today's audience.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll watch that thing at the drop of a hat. I think I've seen it I saw it 3 times when it played at the McDonald Theater in Eugene, and I've probably seen it 30 times since then. And it cheers my soul, that movie. And I've tried many times to explain why, and I think I probably get it about 15% of it. But you know, it's just one of those things that who knows. I think its reputation has gained a little bit in the recent years, but it's never going to be a movie that everybody loves. And I can live with that. My father-in-law, who passed away last November, he's Japanese American. He survived an internment camp, and for years and years and years, his wife is like a huge fan of big Hollywood blockbusters. You know, Mission Impossible. That's her thing. She'll watch anything wacky and wild and crazy. But for years, I'd never showed her 1941 or him, because I thought, well, you know, they lived through this, and it wasn't, you know, a wacky Animal House influenced comedy, even though the movie is very critical of behavior. And the most dignified people in it are the people that Toshiro Mifune and the Japanese sub off the coast of California. But so I hesitated showing it to him. And late last year, like a month or so before he passed away, I said, screw it, let's watch 1941. And I put it on for them, and they loved it. They loved it. They talked about it the whole drive home. It's like, oh my gosh, that was the craziest movie I ever saw in my life. And it just kind of warms my heart to think that that's the last movie my father-in-law saw. And it means a lot to me. And I don't know. That's kind of the thing that I try to do, is try to figure out how to express that kind of stuff without becoming like, you know, fanboy about it or anything like that. You know, making sure that what I say about something like that makes sense and would maybe inspire somebody who reads it to look at it again or look at it a little closer.
That's a really valid point, because 1941 is without a doubt a very flawed film. As Steven Spielberg has probably tried to disown being affiliated in any way he possibly can.
He's way too critical of it.
Right. But
he shouldn't be as ashamed of it as he is.
But what it shows, you know, Spielberg maybe got outside of his lane. He's the absolute best at what he does, but he tried to do a screwball comedy in the veil of Animal House and kind of discovered maybe he can't do it. And so he hasn't really gone back and revisited that genre throughout the rest of his. He tried it with 1941. It has its audience. I love it with all of its flaws because of its flaws, and just for the sake of being a fun, stupid movie of a bunch of crazy things happening. And why can't you just like it for that and not constantly trash everything that isn't Gone with the Wind or Casablanca, or, you know,
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
You know, 1941 has this great musical sequence in it. And I think the movie is kind of like that at large, but there's this sequence in the USO that is one of the best dance sequences that's ever been made. And then he turned around 3 years later and did the same thing to open up Indiana Jones Doom. Yep. So he's got, when we end up seeing West Side Story, it's like, no surprise, the man can do a musical number. And it's like, you know, he can do those kinds of things. And, you know, or even something like that animated movie that he directed a few years ago, The Adventures of Tintin.
Yeah.
Very similar sensibility to 1941 and Temple of Doom. And yet those are the movies that he gets in hot water for, because they're out of his lane, as you say. It's not a straightforward indie movie or you know, something else like an E.T. or something that, you know, he knows he's going to be safe with. So he's been basically kind of, you know, every time he's gone out and done something a little outre or wacky, he's gotten his knuckles wrapped for it. And, you know, that's too bad, because I love those movies. I'd watch those before I'd watch, you know, one of his more prestigious things, or, you know, even you know, I'm going to go see Jaws this weekend again, so I'm not going to complain about that. But you know, there are movies that he's made that are just great.
You've mentioned some of your all-time favorite films. Do you have favorite directors as well?
Oh yes, my favorite director is Robert Altman, who I mentioned I kind of had a checkered history with when I was a young guy. My hometown theater, the Alger, showed Nashville and Buffalo Bill and the Indians, both of which I saw and both of which I hated. And the reason I hated them is because I was too doggone young to get it. I didn't have any life experience beyond, you know, what I could chalk up in Lakeview, which wasn't much. So when I went to college to University of Oregon, I had a chance to see these movies again and see them in the context that I was missing before. And Altman's movies just look so much different to me than anybody. And so I just started feeding on them. When Bill Cadbury showed Nashville in our film class, I saw it 3 times in one day, which I've never seen any movie that many times in a single day. It just was exciting to be able to see him. I love Altman. I love Sergio Leone. I love there's a French new wave filmmaker called Agnes Varda, she was the one that was kind of doing films in the new wave before even Jean-Luc Godard and a couple of the other more famous folks who were doing films like that. She's got a terrific body of work that I am fortunate to own. On the Criterion Collection put out a big box of it, you know, all of her films. Got that a few years ago. Fellini, I'll watch just about anything he ever does.
Does any of it make sense to this day?
Yes, surprisingly, which may be more of a reflection on me than anything else. Because believe me, I had my troubles with Fellini as well.
So it's interesting that you went down that French path. My all-time favorite director is Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I adore his works. I think Delicatessen, A Very Long Engagement, and Micmacs are masterpieces. Like
Very Long Engagement is really great.
A trilogy of nearly flawless films. And like you were saying with your favorite director, nothing else looks like a Jeunet film. Like he has such unique cinematography. Everything that he makes looks totally unique. I know in this country, people really only know him for Amelie, but he's made so much more than that.
Yeah. No, I think what you're getting at is exactly what I look for when I see a filmmaker who does work that I think is fantastic. And one of the things that I always think about, whether it's Altman or whenever I watch a great Brian De Palma movie, Dressed to Kill, Blowout, Casualties of War, I'll look at those movies and I'll think every movie should be like this. This is what movies are like. And for the time that I'm watching it, I'm not interested in any other ways of making movies. That's the way to do it. When the movie's over with and everything, it percolates and then you start to see the rest of the world. But the 100 minutes that I'm in Dressed to Kill, that's, by God, that movie is amazing.
Oh yeah. Well, this has been a super fun conversation, but I'm sad to say it's almost 8 o'clock. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
Yeah,
I always want to give people one final chance to chime in with either one last question or if they just have comments. And then we'll give the floor to you, Dennis, for any final thoughts. But Nina, why don't you start with you? Do you have a question or any final thoughts on our conversation tonight?
No, I just think I appreciate it. I love getting another input and perspective on things, and I'm gonna have to watch 1941. I have not seen that yet.
Yes. I'm evangelistic about very few movies, but that one definitely.
I will definitely check it out.
Be prepared for a very weird, odd experience where you'll be going, Spielberg made this? Really?
I watched some pretty strange movies, so I think I'll be prepared.
Okay. Lori, do you have a final question or a comment you want to share?
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed listening and hearing about your experiences, Dennis. I'm really glad
you.
that you were able to join us. I do have one last question, if you're willing to
Sure.
go down this sort of small little side tangent, but I'm just wondering, just with all your experiences that you've had, like if you were able to talk to a younger version of yourself, like what advice or like don't do this, you know, like go do this or don't do this, like what would you give to yourself?
I would say to myself, you don't know half of what you think you do. When I came to Los Angeles, I came from Lakeview. I was maybe one of 2 or 3 other people who I knew who were real serious movie people. We were into it for the long haul. And so when I came down to Los Angeles, I started, being exposed to people who lived down here and had richer experiences than I did, richer bodies of knowledge. And it was really a valuable thing for me to go to see some of these people who I knew through my works or just, who I'd meet, who I realized, oh my God, these people know so much more than I do. I'll never know as much about this corner of things or about things in general as these people do. So I would tell myself, if I was able to speak to my 15 or 16-year-old self, you don't have to think you know it all. And it's best not to think you know it all. And you don't know it all. And keep your eyes open and keep your head open, because that's, when I came from Lakeview to Eugene to go to college, I was just a little hayseed. I thought I knew a lot. And, being able to sit around and watch films that I would have never watched on my own with people who were willing to kind of push me into discussing them and thinking about them, it's the most valuable thing ever for me, because it's such a gateway to critical thinking about every aspect of life. That's what's important, I think, is that, and that's why a lot of film critics are trying to write about things that have such a limited perspective in terms of what their backgrounds are and what their knowledge is. That's why they're not so valuable as film writers, I think, because they don't bring a whole lot to the table other than their enthusiasm for, Martin Scorsese or whoever it might be. And so I would just say, open your eyes and learn. And everybody does that in their own way. And I'm sure glad that I got to do it the way I did.
For sure.
Howard and Joyce, your opportunity to chime in if you're still with us there.
We are here, and I would like to say what a joy it was to meet Dennis.
Well,
Dennis, you're refreshing. I love your output of your career, what you've gone through, what it took to go through what you've gone through, which has been a hell of a lot. I empathize with you wholeheartedly. And I can definitely see why, is it Catherine? I think Catherine has you up there on her chart as a #1. I mean, you're something special, and we really enjoyed getting to meet you tonight. And I hope that you continue with what you're doing. It's rewarding for us just to be able to listen to you and hear your ventures from the get-go on to now, and continue with your progress. We'll
Thank
be
you.
there at the other end.
Well, I don't know how to do anything else, Joyce, so I guess I'm stuck.
Well, good for you. We'll be looking forward to it.
All right.
Howard, did you want to chime in too, or did Joyce just sum it up?
You summed it up. There's not enough time for what I have left, so let's just move on.
Okay. Catherine, as our previous featured guest and now just another person on the call, thank you so much for being here and for all of your help with our film festival. But since you introduced us to Dennis, your final thoughts as well. And you are muted.
I just wanted to say what a joy it is to be like in the back room of Cinema 7 again with you, Dennis.
Yeah. I just watched a Herzog movie last week, Catherine, and I thought of you the whole way.
I bet. I bet. This is so wonderful, Kurt, this opportunity for me and to bring Dennis and we look forward to seeing you guys at the film festival, Dennis. We're creating a poster with you and Bruce on it.
No,
And our guests, and yeah, save me one of yours, Kurt, and I'm going to bring some of these down too.
I'll make sure to set one of these aside. We got orders in for shirts. Catherine, your name is on our shirt, so we'll make sure that one is saved for you as well. We got our lanyards in, so it's all coming together. Still a lot left to do for 2 weeks before things happen, and I am so bummed that they're gonna have to film everything, because ironically I'm gonna be in Eugene on our Friday night activities, so I will get back to Klamath as quickly as I can, but it's in Cassidy and Bowen and Nina's able hands to run the show in my absence for Friday and Saturday, and then I'll get there Saturday night and be there for all day Sunday. I don't know how long you were planning to stay, if you're just going to be there for the Friday thing or not, but we've got some really amazing films this year, so I certainly hope you stick around.
Yeah.
I wish I could be there.
Yeah.
I'll be there for the I guess it's the Zoom call on
Yep.
September 16th.
Yeah.
But when I saw the poster and I realized that I thought you were just going to show the documentary, but that you were going to show the actual movie.
Mm-hmm.
The Ross Raglan used to be the Esquire,
Yes.
and I would drive 100 miles each way and spend a weekend going to the movies in Klamath Falls. And boy, oh boy, would it be neat to see Animal House on that screen.
Oh, nice.
I know. I think I'm probably going to cry all the way through it.
Yeah.
So it's like a time capsule going back there, the way they restored it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We may not have had the budget to fly everybody in this time, but who knows? We'll work on trying to get everybody together.
We started doing it in 2020. KIF was actually the only film festival in the country during the pandemic that was able to welcome an in-theater audience. So at the Raglan, we were able to space out seats, and we also figured out how to make our festival hybrid. So for this will be our third year of the festival being both in person and online. So Dennis, you can participate. We have online passes where we live stream everything that we do on stage, and all the films will be on demand through the end of September.
As his agent, I want him to have a free pass.
I think I can probably arrange that.
Okay, good.
I would love to see Dennis there in person, if possible.
I
Me
would
too,
love that.
Joyce. Me too.
Yeah,
All of
yeah.
my
It would make it complete, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's not just Dennis. Catherine's been working on putting the band back together.
Oh, I know. I'm counting on
for
her
Friday.
being- Yeah.
Well, all I did was I was lucky enough to have a woman with some free Alaska Air miles, but she only had 90,000. So that was enough to get Otis here.
Nice.
So anyway, but Dennis, we're going to have a 50th, and you and I are going to be there.
Oh, that'd be great.
Maybe it'll be with Kurt.
That would be great.
I would love to actually participate. Like I said, I grew up in the lore of Animal House because I grew up practically on campus at the U of O, but I was born in '79. So I just missed out on that, but I've grown up watching it. I felt for the longest time like it was a prerequisite to go to college. You have to watch Animal House. And over time, I've grown to have even more appreciation for it. I'm a huge University of Oregon sports fan. And so it's great to see how starting in 2009, they started celebrating Animal House by playing the fraternity party scene between the third and fourth quarter at Autzen, and now they play it at the basketball games too. And to kind of reconnect to that history after, and we don't have time to get into the whole backstory, but we've delved into it previously how the film even ended up at the University of Oregon, and now they didn't want to be associated with it and all that. That's why it's called Faber. And now it's this celebrated piece that is like the culmination of the college experience. And it's the University of Oregon of all places. How cool is that? My hometown, my school, even though I didn't actually attend there.
Funny thing about it is that, and I don't know if Catherine knows this or not, but I met my best friend on the set of Animal House. I recognized him from a performance that I'd seen, a thespian performance at the state festival. And so I introduced him and introduced myself to him, and we became fast friends, and we've been best friends for 45 years now. And we would sit around on the set and look at each other and the chaos of this production and go, oh my God, this movie is just gonna be awful. It's just gonna suck. It's just, there's no chance it could be good. We're looking at it from the perspective of extras who are being moved around all over the place and thinking the continuity in this movie is just awful. It's just not gonna work. And, of course, we didn't realize, being, small-minded individuals that we were, that nobody was there to see us. That's not why they were watching this movie. They're going to see it in a whole different way. And, we didn't expect it to be
I'm excited to see it.
a big hit or anything like that. So when it really took off, it's like, wow.
What?
And then, at TCM Film Festival, 3 years ago, I guess it must have been, they did a 40th anniversary screening of Animal House, and they had, there was like 9 or 10 cast members, including John Landis. And I brought my whole family, including my 2 daughters, and we made a whole big thing out of it. And I'm sitting there watching it and thinking, wow, 40 years ago, making this thing, we would have never guessed that 40 years later, people be sitting around going, this is a classic. But
not just a classic, but
Didn't Landis recognize you?
Yes, yeah. What was funny, because I've seen, I showed him your screen grabs and stuff that you'd sent to me, and so they were kind of primed for it, and they'd seen pictures of what I looked like, which is not what I look like now, obviously. But I would sit next to him and I'd just kind of point, and they'd go, oh yeah, there you are. Oh, and there you are. And it was kind of like that. It was fun.
I would argue that Animal House is not only a classic, but we listed all those 80s films. I think it's one of the most influential films ever made, because look at all of the comedies that came after it that were made in the, I doubt we would even have like the American Pie films if not for Animal House establishing that foundational mold.
Yep, I agree. Yeah.
So
and, not all of those movies are great, but some of them were really good, and nobody's going to complain about Caddyshack or anything like that following in the footsteps. So it's
or
like
1941, because the entire basis of 1941 was I want Bluto in an airplane during World War II, and I'll figure out the rest of it.
Exactly.
So we've gone way over on our time, but Dennis, the floor is yours. If you have any final thoughts or things that you'd like to share about our conversation tonight, or your career, or advice for our members.
I think basically what I wanted to say was that just to express my regret that I won't be able to be there in person to walk into that theater and see it, because I've seen that movie in a lot of great theaters. The TCM thing was at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, which is just
Wow.
about as spectacular as it gets. But the
It's not the
Esquire
same.
and the long lamented Tower Theater, just a few miles away, were real touchstones for me. And the Shasta Drive-In too. Let's not forget that. But the Esquire, I mean, I saw, you know, a lot of formative movies in that theater that I didn't get around to seeing in my hometown. And and a lot of movies that didn't really last as long in my memory as well. But I have certain, I mean, I can close my eyes and remember what it looked like in there. I'd love to see what it looks like now.
Well,
Because-
Dennis, I can email you. A couple of years ago, our previous executive director before me made a 20-minute documentary that's on Vimeo called Ragland.
Oh,
That covers the history of all of the the history of all of the theaters in Klamath Falls, as well as the Ross Ragland today. And Catherine, you probably want to see that too. So I will send you the link for that as well. And so that you two can check it out and at least get a sense of what it looks like today. Because Catherine, I don't know, when was the last time you were in Klamath?
Long time. Long time.
So a very long overdue homecoming is coming up in a couple of weeks then. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Nina, Lori, Howard, Joyce, and Catherine for joining us. So we usually get a little bit larger crowd than this, but that's okay. We were kind of late in announcing the meeting, so that's understandable. But thank you.
And stay
Oh,
on
yep.
after. I have to call Otis's niece at 8:30. I need to talk to you.
Oh,
Okay?
okay. To everyone else, thank you for being here. And we will see you hopefully in a couple of weeks at the film festival and see you next month as well on the first Thursday of October.
Love
awesome.
you, Dennis.
Love you too,
Thank
Catherine.
you.
Thanks for having me here.
Thanks. Bye.